What can an old man do when his own daughter believes her new husband more than her own child? How far can a quiet grandfather go, inside the rules? When his grandson calls from a police station in the middle of the night and says his stepfather hurt him and blamed him instead? The night I walked into that station and saw the officer's face change, I understood that I was not as powerless as they thought. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Leon, and I never thought my quiet life would end up in a police station lobby in the middle of the night. At my age, I thought my biggest problems would be my knees, the cold in the winter, and the slow elevator in my building. I was wrong. That evening started like many others. I was in my small living room in my old brown armchair by the window. The television was on, but I was not really watching. The sound was low, just background noise. On the small table beside me, there was a cold cup of tea and my reading glasses. Next to the glasses lay a framed photo of my grandson, Noah, when he was 8. In that picture, he was holding a toy train and smiling at me like I was the safest person in the world. Things were different now. Noah was 14, taller, quieter, and always tired. I did not see him as often as I wanted. His mother, my daughter Melissa, lived across town in a house I had helped her buy. Her husband, Travis, made sure I felt like a visitor there, not like family. I told myself it was normal. Life changes, children grow up, fathers step back. That night, I tried to read a book, but the words did not stay in my head. My thoughts kept going to Noah. The last time I saw him, he had looked at me for a long time before I left, like he wanted to say something important and could not bring himself to do it. I had felt a hard knot in my chest since then. I tried to push it away. The phone rang, and the sound cut through the quiet room like a sharp bell in an empty hall. At first, I thought it was a wrong number or some late advertisement. I picked it up slowly, already prepared to say that I was not interested. Then I saw the screen. It was Noah's name. My hand shook a little as I pressed the answer button. His voice came through, small and uneven. He said he was at the police station. He said Travis had hurt him, and now everyone there believed that he was the one who started it. He said that his mother was standing with Travis and not with him. Then he said he needed me to come because I was the only person who would listen. For a moment, I could not speak. My tongue felt heavy. I stood up from my chair so fast that my knee sent a shot of pain through my leg. I told him in a steady voice that I was coming. I did not ask for details. I knew if I stopped to ask too many questions, I might freeze in place. I ended the call, grabbed my old coat from the hook, and stepped into my shoes without tying them properly. The night air outside was cold and sharp. The streetlights made long yellow lines on the wet pavement. I locked my door and moved as fast as my body allowed. My car sat under the same tree it had been under for years. I had to take a deep breath to calm myself before I got in. Being in a hurry is bad when your hands shake and your heart is pounding in your ears. I needed to be clear, not wild. The drive to the station felt both long and short. The roads were almost empty. I knew the way by heart. I had been there years ago for union meetings and to help workers with problems. Back then, I was steady, younger, and people listened when I spoke. Now I was just an old man in a worn jacket, driving through the night to pick up a frightened boy who trusted me more than his own home. When I pulled into the small parking lot, the building looked harsh under the white lights. The glass doors shone like a cold mirror. I saw my reflection for a second. Gray hair, lined face, tired eyes. This was the face people often ignored when I tried to give advice at family dinners. Inside, the lobby smelled of strong coffee and old paper. The chairs were plastic and hard. A television in the corner played a news channel with no sound. The light was bright and unforgiving. It made every wrinkle on my hands look deeper. Behind the counter, a young officer sat with a bored expression, tapping something on the computer. Near the wall, I saw Melissa. She was in her work clothes, hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. She did not look like a nurse comforting her child. She looked like a person waiting for a problem to go away on its own. Travis stood next to her, his shoulders straight, his clothes neat. One arm was held close to his side, and I could see a small bandage on his wrist. He looked calm, like a man who knew he was in control. Melissa saw me and did not move at first. Then she walked over with small, careful steps. She said that Noah had lost control and that things had gone too far. She said the officer had already heard Travis's version and that they were trying to handle it. She sounded like she was explaining a difficult shift at work, not a crisis with her son. I asked where Noah was. She pointed down the hallway and said he was in a small room, waiting. She added that he was very upset and that I needed to be careful with what I told him because the station did not like drama. There was a small tremor in her voice when she said that word, but she swallowed it quickly. Travis came closer and greeted me with a fake smile. He said that Noah had attacked him and that he had only held him back. He said that teenagers these days had no respect and that, in his opinion, I had made things worse by always taking Noah's side and not letting him grow up. He spoke slowly, like a teacher explaining a simple rule to a slow student. I listened without interrupting. I have learned that silence often makes people show more than they want. He talked about my age, about how I did not understand modern parenting. He said that the officer had already understood everything and that we just needed to make sure Noah learned his lesson. Melissa stood beside him and nodded, though her eyes did not meet mine. I felt something heavy in my chest, but it was not anger. It was a deep, tired sadness. For years, I had tried to step back, to let my daughter build her own life. I had given money for the house, helped with repairs, taken Noah for weekends when they needed rest. Little by little, my place changed from father to guest, from guest to problem. Now Travis stood in front of me in this bright lobby and spoke as if my presence was a small annoyance. I walked to the counter and asked the young officer if I could see the boy. He looked at me without much interest and asked who I was. I told him my name and that I was the boy's grandfather. The officer said that, for now, they needed to talk to the adults, and that I should take a seat and wait. His tone was polite but distant, the tone people use when they want you to stay quiet. I glanced back at Travis. He had moved closer to the young officer earlier and had talked in a friendly, confident way. I could imagine how he told his story, calm, reasonable, using words like discipline and rules and respect. People like that know how to sound right in rooms like this. I did not sit. I asked the officer if I could speak with whoever was in charge for the night. I kept my voice soft and even. No shaking, no raised tone. Just a clear request. The young man sighed and asked again for my full name. I repeated it and spelled my last name slowly. He turned to his computer, typed it in, and then something changed. His shoulders straightened, his eyes focused on the screen. His hand stopped tapping. For a second, he just stared, and the bored look on his face disappeared. He scrolled, read something, and then glanced up at me in a new way. I knew that look. I had seen it in meetings years ago, when a manager realized that the quiet man in the room knew more about the rules than they did. It was a look that said, "This is not just some old man. There is history here." The officer swallowed and asked me, in a more respectful tone, to wait for Officer Green, who was in the back. He said that Officer Green would want to speak with me personally. He did not explain why. He no longer told me to sit. He simply asked me to give him a minute. Melissa noticed the change and frowned. Travis did too. He asked the officer if there was some problem. The officer only said that he needed to call his superior and that it would not take long. Then he picked up the phone and spoke in a low voice, glancing my way more than once. I stood in the middle of the lobby, feeling every second stretch. My legs hurt, but I refused to sit. My grandson was in a small room somewhere behind that hallway, believing that he was alone. I wanted him to know, when he saw me, that I had not come here as a week-old figure. I had come as someone who still knew how to stand. A few minutes later, a door opened at the side of the lobby, and a taller man in an older uniform walked in. This was Officer Green. He looked like he had seen many nights like this. The young officer said my name to him, and I saw the same shift again, stronger this time. Green studied my face, then nodded slowly, like he was putting together pieces of a picture. He walked over, greeted me, and thanked me for coming so quickly. His voice was careful, more careful than it had been with Travis earlier. He said he remembered my name from past reports and from some meetings long ago. He did not say more in front of the others. Then he turned to the young officer and asked him to print something from the computer. A few pages began to come out of the printer, the sound loud in the quiet lobby. Travis tried to ask what was going on, but Green did not answer him. He took the pages, glanced at them, then looked back at me. His tone changed again, slower now and more serious. He said he was sorry he had not understood who I was at once. He said there were older notes connected to my family and that he needed to speak with me privately before they went any further. He lifted his hand and pointed toward the same side door he had just come through. He asked me to follow him into a small conference room so we could talk. Behind me, I could feel Travis watching, and for the first time that night, his confident calm seemed to crack, even if only a little. When Officer Green closed the door behind us, the noise of the lobby became a dull hum. The small room had a long table, 4 chairs, and a whiteboard with some faded writing on it. There was a pot of coffee on a side shelf, half empty. The air felt heavy and dry. He asked me to sit, and this time I did. My legs were starting to complain, and I needed my strength. He placed the printed pages on the table, but kept his hand over them. He said he remembered my name from years earlier. He mentioned union meetings, a few tense nights when workers and management did not agree, and how I had always been the one who brought paper copies of rules and timelines. He said I had once helped calm a very bad situation, not by shouting, but by knowing the laws better than the people breaking them. Hearing that pulled me back to a time before Travis, before this new house, before my daughter started choosing peace over truth. After Melissa's first marriage ended, she and Noah came to stay with me for a while. My apartment was small, but it felt full in a good way. Noah slept on the couch at first and did not complain once. We cooked simple meals, watched old cartoons, and put together model trains on the living room floor. Melissa looked tired, but there was still light in her eyes when she watched her son laugh. Those were hard months, but honest ones. Melissa had debts from the old place and from her training as a nurse. She worked extra shifts, sometimes came home after midnight, and said she was worried about Noah seeing her like that. I told her she was doing her best and that the boy saw her as a hero anyway. At that time, when she doubted herself, she still came to me. She asked what she should do with money, with work, with school. I felt like a father again, not just an older man sitting in a corner. We found a small rental for them after a few months. It was a narrow house with thin walls, but it had a little yard and a bedroom for Noah. I helped paint the walls and fix the loose cupboard doors. Noah watched me with a paintbrush in his hand and asked how I had learned to repair so many things. I told him it came from years on the railway and years of not having money for new furniture. He smiled and said that one day he would build something big like a station. Back then, his dreams were louder than his fears. Travis came into our lives later. Melissa met him through a coworker at the hospital. The first time I heard his name was in a short message. She said there was a man who helped her carry heavy boxes at work and who made her laugh during long shifts. I wanted to be happy for her. I knew she felt lonely and tired, and I did not want her to think I wanted her to stay alone forever. The first evening I met him was in Melissa's rental living room. I had brought over some tools to fix a dripping pipe. Travis arrived after his job, carrying a bag with some groceries. He smiled widely, shook my hand, and spoke with the easy tone of someone who is sure people will like him. He told me he respected older generations and that he thought family was very important. He called me sir in a way that sounded polite, but also a little like a performance. At dinner, he talked most of the time. He told long stories about his work, about people who did not follow rules, about how he was the one who always brought order. He had strong opinions about how children should behave. He said that teenagers needed firm limits, and that, in his view, the problem in the world was that parents wanted to be friends with their children. When he said that, he looked at me with a small smile, as if he already knew how I treated Noah. I remember the way Noah sat at the table that night, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes moving between his mother and this new man. Whenever Travis spoke in a sharp tone, the boy's fingers tightened around his fork. Melissa, who used to jump in when someone spoke too harshly, stayed quiet, listening with a small, careful smile. Things moved quickly after that. Travis started coming over more often. He fixed some things around the house, laughed with the neighbors, and told Melissa that the rental was too small for a family with ambitions. One evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Melissa told me that Travis thought they could manage something better with their combined income and that they were looking at houses across town. I knew she could not afford a large house alone, even with all her extra shifts. I sat at the table with her and looked at the numbers on her paper. I saw the gap between what they wanted and what the bank would give. I had some savings from my years on the railway and from simple living after retirement. I had planned to use them for my last years, maybe for a small trip one day. Instead, I thought about Noah. I thought about a stable room for him, a good school nearby, a garden where he could grow something. I told Melissa I would help with the down payment, but I wanted my name on the papers, not to control her, but to make sure that the house would always be a safe place for her and Noah, no matter what happened with any future partner. She agreed, hugged me, and told me I was the best father anyone could ask for. That was the last time I remember her hugging me like that. The new house looked impressive when we first saw it. It had a clean front yard, a bright kitchen, and a bigger bedroom for Noah. The agent used words like investment in the future and perfect family street. We signed a thick stack of documents at a small office table. I read each page slowly, as I always do. I asked questions. The agent grew a little impatient, but I insisted. In the end, my name went next to Melissa's, and I felt calmer. I believed this place would protect them. Moving day was loud and cheerful. I carried boxes, Travis carried bigger ones, and Noah ran around with his arms full of books and toys. The neighbors came to introduce themselves, and Travis seemed to enjoy shaking hands and making jokes at the fence. In those moments, I wanted to believe this would work. I wanted to believe that I had helped build a good future. Over time, the small details started to change. On weekends, I would come by with groceries or tools. At first, Travis thanked me and said I was too generous. Later, he joked that I liked to feel useful. Then, he started telling me not to fix certain things because he wanted professionals to handle them and did not want old methods in his house. He said it with a laugh, like a joke, but there was a point in it. In the backyard, he would talk more openly. One afternoon, while Noah kicked a ball against the fence, Travis stood beside me and said that I needed to let go and let him be the man of the house. He told me in a casual tone that Noah needed more strict rules and that my way of treating him like a friend was soft. He said that real respect only came when children felt a strong hand. He did not touch the ball himself. He just watched it hit the fence again and again. Melissa started working more night shifts in the new place. When I visited, she often looked exhausted. Travis spoke for both of them. He said that everything was fine, that Noah was just going through a challenging phase, and that they were handling it. When I tried to ask Noah how he was, Travis would stay in the room, listening, or call him away to do some chore. There was one moment that stayed with me like a stone. I came over early one evening with a bag of food and a small gift for Noah, a set of simple drawing pencils. I let myself in with the key Melissa had given me long ago. In the living room, Noah sat on the floor, homework spread out around him. When he heard the door, he jumped to his feet so fast that some paper slid across the floor. For a second, his face was pure fear, until he realized it was only me. Then it changed to relief, then to something like shame. He whispered my name and quickly began picking up his papers. I asked him if everything was all right. He said he was fine, just tired. His voice was flat. When Travis came in, Noah's shoulders tightened again. Travis greeted me, looked down at the pencils, and said that he hoped I was not rewarding lazy work. He spoke as if Noah was not even in the room. I saw my grandson's face go blank, the way a child's face sometimes does when they decide not to show anything. After that, the space for me in the house got smaller. My visits became shorter. Travis began to make small comments about how often I came and how the family needed their own rhythm. Melissa repeated that they were busy and that Noah had many activities now. She said it in messages and short calls with tired sighs between words. She did not ask me to bring groceries anymore. The first time she asked me directly to leave the house during a tense moment was the evening that never left my mind. I had come over on a Sunday afternoon. The sky was gray and the backyard was wet from earlier rain. Inside, the house felt heavy. I could sense something was wrong the moment I stepped in. Noah was at the kitchen table, hands on his lap, eyes on a plate he had not touched. Travis stood by the counter, arms folded. Melissa moved between them, carrying plates and cutlery with stiff motions. I tried to lighten the mood by asking Noah about school, about any project he was working on. He answered in short phrases. Travis interrupted to say that school was not the problem, that the boy just did not listen and needed to learn respect. Melissa said nothing, but the way her shoulders were pulled up told me that this scene was not new. Later, I was in the backyard, standing near the fence. I could hear the voices from inside through the half-open door. Travis's voice grew louder, sharper at the edges. Noah's voice was softer, then stopped. A chair scraped hard against the floor. There was a long pause that made my chest tighten more than any shout. Then the back door opened. Melissa stepped out, her face pale and tense. She did not meet my eyes. She said that things were difficult right now, and that I should go home so they could handle this as a family. She told me not to worry, that everything was under control, and that I should trust her. I looked past her into the kitchen. For a second, I saw Noah's face. His eyes met mine, wide and pleading, before Travis stepped between us and closed the door. After that Sunday when Melissa asked me to leave, I drove home with the radio off. The city lights passed by my window like a stream of silent faces. In the back of my mind, I kept seeing Noah's eyes looking at me from the kitchen just before the door closed. It felt like a hand had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart. At home, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen and an old notebook. I wrote the date at the top of the page and a short line. I was sent out of the house while voices were raised inside, and Noah looked scared. The words felt small compared to what I had seen, but I wrote them anyway. I had learned long ago that memory can be twisted, but ink on paper is harder to move. Days passed. Melissa sent a few messages about work and about being busy. She said that Noah was fine, just stressed from school. She used words like phase and hormones. Travis sent nothing to me directly, but sometimes in the family chat, he wrote loud opinions about kids needing discipline. I read those lines and said nothing. Other relatives reacted with simple emojis. They did not see what I saw in that boy's eyes. One afternoon, I received a call from a number I did not know. I almost did not answer, but something told me to pick up. The man on the line introduced himself as Mr. Lawson from Noah's school. His voice was calm and careful. He said he wanted to speak with me if I had time, because my name was listed as an emergency contact. We met 2 days later in a small office at the school. The room had a narrow window, a desk, 2 chairs, and posters about mental health on the walls. There were shelves with books and files. It smelled faintly of dust and marker pens. Mr. Lawson was younger than me by many years, but there was a tired kindness in his eyes. He thanked me for coming and said he knew my time was valuable. Then he asked how much I knew about what had been happening with Noah at home. I told him that I did not know enough, only that the boy seemed more quiet and tense lately. I said I had seen him flinch when the front door opened and that I had been asked to leave during tense moments. I did not speak badly about Travis. I simply described what I had observed. Mr. Lawson listened without interrupting. Then he explained that Noah had come to see him several times over the past year. He said that the boy had described rough handling, harsh words, and long lectures that went far beyond normal teaching. Noah had talked about feeling like he was always wrong, always walking on thin glass. The counselor said that, more than once, he had seen marks on Noah's arms or neck, and that the explanations given did not always match. Hearing that made my stomach tighten. I asked if any official steps had been taken. Mr. Lawson said he had made notes and had spoken with Melissa once, but she had insisted that things at home were under control and that Noah was simply dramatic. He said he had to respect her position as a parent, but the pattern still worried him. He turned his computer screen slightly so I could see a simple list of dates. He did not show me the notes, but the dates themselves told me enough. There were more entries than I had imagined. On some of those days, I remembered short messages from Melissa saying Noah was difficult and that she needed to rest. On others, I remembered nothing, which meant I had been outside the circle, like a stranger. We left the school office together and walked to a small cafe near the entrance. Mr. Lawson said he felt more comfortable speaking away from the school walls. In the cafe, the noise of cups and quiet talk created a little cover for us. He repeated that he could not accuse anyone without clear proof, but he did not like the feeling that the story at home always shifted blame onto the same boy. He told me that Noah often spoke about me, about weekends at my apartment years earlier, about model trains and simple dinners. He said that the boy saw me as the only adult who really listened. Hearing that made my throat feel tight. I took a slow breath and wrapped my hands around my cup of tea to keep them steady. I told Mr. Lawson that I had helped buy the house where they now lived and that my name was still on the papers. I said I did not mention that often because I did not want to look like I was buying a place in their lives. I also mentioned my work in the union, not to impress him, but to explain that I was not afraid of forms or procedures. He nodded and said that this might matter later. On my way home, I stopped by the clinic where Noah had been taken once, months earlier, after what Melissa had called an accident on the stairs. I remembered that night clearly. I had arrived at the waiting area to find Melissa pacing and Travis sitting straight, explaining the incident to a nurse in a confident tone. Noah had been in a room with a doctor. When they came out, the doctor had spoken gently about being careful at home and had let his gaze rest on Travis for a second longer than normal. Now, at the front desk, I asked if it was possible to request general visit records for a family member. They told me it would need formal steps and probably a request from a parent or an official. I did not push too hard. I simply wrote down the dates I remembered and added them to my notebook later. Each date was another small stone in the pile. That evening, as I sat at my kitchen table again, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Noah. The text was simple. He said he was okay for now, but tired. Then another message came, a photo this time. It was of a notebook page. On it, in his handwriting, there were dates and short lines, times when he had been grabbed by the arm, shouted at for long periods, or shut in his room for hours. Some lines were just single words like stair, plate, phone, door. Next to them, in small letters, were notes about how he felt. Scared, numb, helpless. My hand shook as I zoomed in on the photo. I recognized some dates. Others were new to me. He had been keeping his own record, just like I had started to do, but he had been doing it earlier and in secret, like someone hiding small lights in a dark place. I sent him a short reply. I told him I had seen the photo and that I believed him. I told him to keep the notebook safe and not to share it with anyone else yet. I did not promise impossible things. I only said that he was not alone and that I was thinking. After the station night call, Mr. Lawson's notes, and the notebook photo, something inside me moved from fear to clarity. I was no longer asking myself if this was really as bad as it felt. I knew it was. The question now was not whether to act, but how. I thought about walking into the house the next day and confronting Travis in front of Melissa, telling him that I knew what was going on and that he would not lay a hand on my grandson again. I imagined the shouting, the denial, the stories turning against me and Noah. I imagined the neighbors hearing only noise and seeing only an old man and a strong younger one arguing. That picture did not help Noah. It only fed the story that we were the problem. I knew this pattern from my union days. When workers tried to shout their way to justice, management painted them as unstable and used that against them. The only way to win had been with calm steps, records, rules, and a room where other people could see the facts laid out. So I did what I always did when I had to think clearly. I made tea, sat at the table, and opened my old notebook. On one page, I wrote 3 headings: school, hospital, home. Under each, I added short lines, dates, small details, things people had said. I underlined the ones that matched Noah's notebook photo. When I finished, the page looked simple, but each line was a small piece of something larger. I also wrote another word at the top, house. Under it, I wrote that my name was on the title, that I had provided the largest part of the down payment, and that the purpose of that help had always been to give a safe base to my daughter and her child. I remembered the day we signed, how I had asked the agent to include certain phrases. I wrote them down from memory as best as I could. They were not exact legal terms on the page in front of me, but they were enough for someone who knew the law to see what I was talking about. Then I opened the drawer by the table and took out an old business card. The print was slightly faded, but the name was still clear: Ms. Patel, the lawyer who had worked with us during a difficult contract fight years ago. She had been the one who told me to always keep copies, to write dates on everything, and to never rely on promises made only with smiles. For many years, that card had stayed in my drawer, moving from one apartment to another as my life changed. I had never thrown it away. Part of me always felt that one day I might need someone who understood both paper and people. I took my phone, opened my contacts, and scrolled down. I had saved her number there long ago. It was still there, under her full name. My thumb hovered over the call button. I thought about my age, about the time and energy this would take, about the fact that this might pull my whole family into something they would resent me for. Then I thought about Noah, sitting in a small room at the station, calling me because no one else believed him. I thought about the look in his eyes through the kitchen doorway when the door closed. I realized that if I turned away now, I would not be the man he believed I was. I pressed the call button. When Ms. Patel answered, her voice sounded exactly as I remembered it: calm, clear, and a little cautious. She greeted me by name and asked how I had been since the old union days. I said I was older and slower, but still able to read a contract and drink a cup of tea. She laughed softly at that, then asked what made me call after so many years. I did not rush. I told her that this time the problem was not workers and managers, but my own family. I said there was a boy who trusted me, a man in the house who liked control, and a daughter caught somewhere in between. I explained that the boy and the house were the parts I could not ignore. I mentioned that my name was still on the house papers and that the place was meant to be a safe base for my daughter and grandson. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said that I should come to her office and bring whatever I had: any copies of the house title, any notes I had made, and any messages that felt important. She said she could not promise magic, but she could promise clarity. We set a time for 2 days later. Her office was across town, in a modest building with small businesses and clinics. The entrance smelled of cleaning fluid and old carpet. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, step by slow step, feeling the familiar mix of nerves and focus that I used to feel before a negotiation. Her door had a simple sign with her name. Inside, the office was tidy and full of paper. Shelves lined the walls, and a large desk stood by the window. There was a small round table with 2 chairs for clients. She rose to greet me, and time seemed to rewind for a moment. She looked older, of course, but her eyes had the same sharp, steady look I remembered from meetings long ago. She asked me to sit at the small table and placed a legal pad in front of her. She said she wanted to hear the whole story from the beginning, but only the facts, not guesses. That was easy for me. I spoke about the first marriage ending, about helping Melissa and Noah move, about Travis appearing with his easy charm and strong views. I spoke about the house purchase, the agreement on the wall back then that the house was for Melissa and Noah's safety, the way Travis's tone changed over time, and the fear in my grandson's eyes. I told her about the clinic visit, the school counselor, the notebook photo, and finally the night Noah called from the station. I did not raise my voice once. I just laid each piece on the table in words, one after another. She wrote short notes as I spoke, her pen moving fast but controlled. When I finished, she asked a few direct questions: dates, names, amounts of money, exact phrases people had used when the house was bought. I answered as precisely as I could. Where I was not sure, I said so. Then she opened a folder and took out copies of the house papers that she had pulled from the registry that morning after my call. She did not push them at me, but she tapped a few lines with her finger and explained what they meant. She reminded me that my name was not just a decoration on the title, it gave me rights and responsibilities. She pointed out language that said the house was purchased with my funds to provide stable housing for Melissa and Noah. That line, she said, could matter if someone in the house was making it unsafe for the child it was meant to protect. She asked if I had ever signed any later document removing my name or changing the purpose of the support I gave. I said no, never. She nodded and wrote that down. Then she asked about money for Noah's future. I mentioned the education fund I had started when he was still small. I told her I had put aside a fixed amount every month and that the fund was in my name, with Noah as the intended user when he was older. She asked if Melissa or Travis had any control over it. I said no, I had never added them to it. I saw the corner of her mouth move upward a little. She explained that this fund was separate from the house and that, in legal terms, it was not family money for anyone to spend as they wished. It was mine, set aside for Noah. If the environment he lived in was harmful, I could choose to protect that fund until the situation improved or until he was somewhere safe. We spoke for almost an hour. At the end, she pushed her notes into a neat pile and looked at me with a serious expression. She said that what I had described sounded like a pattern where one adult in the house held most of the power and used it without much care. She said that the boy's notebook and the school concerns were important, but they had to be brought into the right channels. If I made a scene at the house, it would only help the stronger voice. If I moved through proper offices and forms, the pattern would become visible to people who could act. She suggested that I contact the Office for Child Services and share what I knew. She said she could prepare a short letter summarizing the house situation and the education fund to show that I had a direct interest and responsibility. She promised to help me if things had to go through family court later, but for now, she said, the first step was to bring the concern into the system in a formal way. On my way out, she reminded me of something she had told me years ago during a contract dispute. Loud people win in hallways, but careful people win in rooms with tables and paper. I thanked her and said that I had not forgotten. The Child Services office was in another low building with glass doors and a tired plant in the corner of the lobby. I made an appointment with a caseworker named Ms. Reed. When I arrived, she greeted me with a polite, professional smile and led me to a small room with 2 chairs and a desk. There were children's drawings on the walls, faded from sunlight. She asked why I'd come. I started with the simplest truth, that my grandson had called me from a station at night and said he felt alone, and that this was not the first time I had been worried. I told her I was not here to make wild claims, but to ask that someone look at the pattern. I spoke about the school counselor, about Noah's notebook photo, and about the clinic visits. I did not show her all my notes at once. I let her ask questions, and I answered them plainly. She asked how the adults in the house reacted when I raised concerns. I said that Melissa moved toward silence and that Travis spoke for everyone. I said he liked to describe the boy as dramatic and me as soft. Miss Reed's eyes narrowed slightly when I said that, but her voice stayed neutral. She asked if there had been any previous reports. I said I did not know for sure, but I suspected the school had at least written something down. She wrote that on her form and said that she would request records from the school and from the clinic. She also asked if there were any neighbors who might have seen or heard anything. I mentioned Ms. Ortiz next door, the woman who liked to water her plants and talk to everyone. I remembered her once asking in a low voice if everything was all right in that house, because she often heard harsh tones and slamming doors. Ms. Reed made a note of the name and address. She explained that this process would take time. They had to look at records, talk to people, and see if the pattern was strong enough to require direct action. She said she could not promise any specific result, but she could promise that what I told her would not simply vanish into a drawer. Before I left, I gave her copies of a few pages from my notebook, the ones with dates that matched the notebook photo from Noah and some school days. I did not give everything. I kept some pages for myself, like a second line of defense. She accepted them and thanked me for being so organized. In the days that followed, life on the surface seemed almost normal. Melissa sent occasional messages about work. Travis wrote in the family chat once or twice, short notes about how they were getting past the incident and how rules were needed now more than ever. Noah's messages were shorter than before, but he always replied when I asked how he was. He wrote that he was tired and that Travis watched his phone more now. I did not go to the house. I did not call Travis. I did not argue with Melissa. I let the silence from my side stand. I knew that loud words from me would only give them something to point at. Instead, I kept adding small lines to my notebook. A strange message, a long gap without contact, a day when Noah suddenly wrote that he could not talk. Then the system slowly began to move. Mr. Lawson called to tell me that someone from Child Services had contacted the school and asked for his notes. He said he had provided them and that he felt relieved because now the burden of carrying this alone was lighter. The clinic wrote back to Child Services and confirmed the visits and reasons noted in their files. Ms. Ortiz, the neighbor, received a polite visit and later told me through a short phone call that she had answered every question honestly. All this happened quietly, without noise at the house. On the surface, Travis could still tell those around him that he was in control. But under that surface, lines of text were forming in files with official stamps. One afternoon, I sat again at my kitchen table, the same place where I had written my first short line after being sent out of the house. The notebook now lay open, several pages filled with my careful writing. Next to it were printed copies of some messages from Melissa and Travis, where they spoke of discipline and of me spoiling the boy, and where Travis had once joked that he would straighten Noah out even if it took all year. My phone lay between the notebook and the prints. It vibrated once, then stopped. A new message appeared from a number I had saved as Ms. Reed. I opened it. She asked if I could talk. I called her at once. Her voice sounded more serious than before, but also more focused. She told me that after reviewing the school notes, the clinic records, the neighbor's words, and my statements, her office had decided to move forward. She said they would not simply wait for another call from the station. They wanted the family to come together in one room, with an officer present, so that the situation could be discussed in full and next steps could be decided. She said the meeting would take place at the same station where Noah had called me that night, in a conference room used for family cases. She explained who would be there: herself, an officer from that night, a representative from the school, and of course, Melissa and Travis. She said I was invited as well, as a key relative and co-owner of the house. Then she gave me the date and time. As she spoke, I reached for a pen and circled the date on my calendar in red. The red circle on the calendar sat on my wall like a small sun. Every time I passed it, my eyes went to that mark. At first, it made my chest feel tight. Then, as days passed, it began to feel like a point of focus instead of just a point of fear. I knew that I could not walk into that meeting empty-handed. I had learned long ago that feelings did not carry much weight in rooms with tables and forms. So I turned my small kitchen into a quiet workroom. One evening, I cleared everything off the table except for my notebook, a pen, and a stack of blank paper. I opened the notebook to the pages where I had written dates and short notes about Noah, the house, and the hospital visits. I also laid out the printed messages from Melissa and Travis that I had saved. Next to them, I placed my phone with Noah's notebook photo open, screen brightness turned down. I decided that if I wanted anyone in that meeting to follow, I had to make my own record easy to read. I took a clean sheet and drew 3 straight columns with a ruler. One for the date, one for what happened, and one for who was present or involved. Then I started copying. Line by line, I moved entries from my notebook and from the photo into this new list. I wrote the dates carefully, double-checking each one. In the second column, I kept my words short. Station call, clinic visit, school meeting, neighbor concern. In the third, I wrote simple names: Noah, Melissa, Travis, doctor, counselor, neighbor, officer. As I worked, I noticed patterns forming. Certain dates appeared in more than one place. A school visit lined up with a clinic visit. A night when I was sent out of the house sat not far from a time when Noah had gone to see Mr. Lawson. Seeing these lines on the same page made my throat tighten, but it also gave me strength. This was not my imagination. It was a chain of small, hard facts. When I finished the timeline, I made a second copy just in case. My hands were tired, so I rested them on the table, palms flat, and let the quiet of the apartment surround me. Outside, the street was calm. Somewhere across town, the house I had helped buy stood with its lights on or off, depending on what Travis decided. For the first time in a long while, I did not picture myself standing in that house as a guest. I pictured myself standing at a different table with different rules. The next day, I called Ms. Patel and told her the date of the meeting and what Ms. Reed had said. Ms. Patel's voice was steady. She said she had already sent a short notice to the family court, marking the case as one that might need attention if any sudden change in living arrangements became necessary. She said this did not mean a full case had started yet, but it placed a small flag in the system. She also asked if I had prepared something clear for myself. I told her about the timeline I had written. She approved of that and advised me to bring copies, but to keep my own original close. She did not tell me what to say at the meeting. She simply reminded me of 3 things: answer only what is asked, speak about what I have seen and recorded, and keep my tone even. After that call, I went to the bank to check on Noah's education fund. The building was cool and quiet, with soft music playing above. At the desk, I asked for a short meeting with an advisor. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes led me to a small booth. I showed her my ID and asked for a printout of the fund details. She printed a simple summary: my name as owner, Noah listed as future user, the balance, and the fact that no other adult was connected. I did not need the numbers to impress anyone. I only needed that structure on paper. I put the summary in a clear folder with my timeline, a copy of the house title Ms. Patel had given me, and printouts of a few key messages. I left out anything that was only emotion. I kept words that showed control and pattern, like when Travis wrote that Noah needed to be straightened out and that I was too soft for this world. I did not need to add my opinion. The words spoke about the speaker. At home, I reviewed the folder each evening, not out of obsession, but out of a need to feel ready. I checked that the pages were in a clean order: house, fund, timeline, messages. I put sticky notes on a few sections, not with extra comments, just little marks so I could find them quickly. Days moved slowly toward the red circle on the calendar. Contact from the family stayed thin. Melissa sent a couple of short messages about work and said that things at home were stable now. Travis posted once in the family chat about supporting strong parenting and added a smile symbol at the end. I did not respond. Some relatives liked his message. Others did not react at all. Noah wrote very little during this time. When he did, it was late at night, simple lines about being tired, about schoolwork, about missing our quiet weekends. He did not speak about the house, and I did not ask him to. I knew his phone might not be in his hands freely. Instead, I told him little stories from my railway days, stories about passengers and coworkers, where the main point was that problems can be solved without shouting. I wanted him to feel that calm was still possible somewhere. 2 days before the meeting, I received a letter from the court with a formal heading. My name and Melissa's name were on it. It confirmed that information from Child Services had been noted and that, if certain concerns were confirmed, emergency steps could be taken regarding living arrangements and funds for Noah. The letter did not say what would happen, it only set the frame. I placed this letter in my folder as well. On the morning before the meeting, I had to go to the family court building to sign a paper Ms. Patel had prepared. The hallway was long and full of doors with small plates. The air smelled of paper and old coffee. People moved quietly, some with worried faces, some with tired ones. It reminded me of stations, but instead of trains, people here waited for decisions. As I walked down the hall, I saw Melissa and Travis at the far end. They did not see me at first. Travis was talking on his phone, his voice low but firm. From his gestures, I could guess he was telling someone that everything was under control and that certain people were overreacting. Melissa stood a little apart from him, arms folded, looking at the floor. For a moment, I considered walking up to them, saying something light about how strange it was to meet in a place like this. Then I decided against it. This was not the time for small words. I turned into the office where I was expected and signed the paper Ms. Patel had prepared. It was a simple confirmation that I had financial responsibility for the fund and that I requested to be informed of any decisions involving it. When I came out, they had already left the hall. I felt oddly grateful for that. I was not sure I was ready to see my daughter's face in this building, where she stood not as a child, but as a mother whose choices were under quiet review. The night before the meeting, I tried to sleep, but rest came in broken pieces. I woke up several times, my head full of images. Noah sitting alone at the station, Travis talking at the kitchen table, Melissa asking me to leave, the look on Officer Green's face when he read my name. Each time I woke, I got up, walked to the kitchen, and checked the folder on the table, like a person checking that their tools are still in place before a task. In the early hours, the sky outside turned pale. I made tea, drank it slowly, and then washed the cup. I dressed in simple, clean clothes, dark trousers, a light shirt, my old jacket. I did not choose them to impress anyone. I chose them because they were comfortable and familiar. I wanted nothing on my body to distract me from what I had to say. Before leaving, I took a last look around my small apartment. The armchair by the window, the framed photo of young Noah with his toy train, the television, the worn rug on the floor. It struck me that this place, though small, felt more honest than the larger house across town. Here, no one pretended that I was in the way. I picked up the folder, slipped my phone into my pocket, and left. The station looked different in daylight, but the structure was the same. The glass doors, the reception desk, the waiting chairs. People came and went, some in uniforms, some in everyday clothes. I told the officer at the front my name and the purpose of my visit. He checked a list, then directed me down a hallway to the family conference room. As I walked, I felt my pulse in my temples, but my steps were steady. I thought again of that first night here, when Noah had called me and I had walked in without preparation, driven only by fear. This time, I carried fear as well, but I also carried paper, dates, and a quiet plan. At the end of the hallway, a door stood slightly open. I could hear faint sounds from inside. Chairs being moved, papers rustling, a pen tapping on the table. I paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and then pushed the door open the rest of the way. The room was not large. A long table stood in the center, with chairs around it. On one side, I saw Travis, already seated. He sat with one arm on the table, body leaning back, face set in a look of controlled calm. Melissa sat next to him, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on a point on the table. She looked tired, but not from a long shift. It was a different kind of tired. On the other side of the table, Ms. Reed sat with a folder in front of her, pen in hand. Next to her was Officer Green, the same steady expression on his face that I had seen the night of the call. Further down, I noticed Mr. Lawson, sitting quietly with a thin file of his own, looking slightly out of place in this setting, but firm. In the center of the table, near the edge closest to my seat, lay a folder with my name on it in large letters. It was closed, the paper crisp. It looked like a door waiting to be opened in front of everyone. Ms. Reed looked up when I entered and asked me to take the empty chair beside her. I nodded to each person in the room, then sat down and placed my folder on the table. My hands were steady. I could feel my heart, but my voice, when I finally used it, would be calm. That was the only promise I made to myself. Ms. Reed started the meeting. She explained that we were there because of a station incident, school concerns, and health records. She said this was not a trial, but a serious discussion about a child's safety. She reminded everyone to speak one at a time and to keep their words simple and clear. She turned to Travis first and asked him to explain what had happened the night Noah called me. He straightened in his chair and spoke in that confident tone I knew so well. He said Noah had become aggressive, that he had tried to discipline him, and that the boy had lashed out. He said I had always taken Noah's side and that this, in his view, had led to a lack of respect. He repeated that the mark on his wrist came from holding Noah back. He did not shout. He did not pound the table. He did not need to. He was used to being believed in rooms like this. Melissa added a few words. She said things had been difficult at home, that Noah could be dramatic, and that she felt torn between her son and her husband. She said she wanted peace and stability, and did not want her son to get into trouble with the station. Her voice shook once, then she tightened it again. Officer Green then spoke. He summarized the night at the station, the first short report they had written, and the earlier records connected to my name and to the family. He mentioned that this was not the first time staff had seen signs of strain around this child. His tone was even, but his choice of words made it clear that this was not just a single event. After he finished, Ms. Reed turned to me. She said she wanted to hear my view, but she asked me to focus on what I had seen, written, and saved, not on what I imagined. I thanked her for saying that. Then I opened my folder. First, I took out my timeline. I handed a copy to her, to Officer Green, and slid one toward Travis and Melissa as well. I kept my original in front of me. I explained that after that Sunday, when I had been asked to leave the house, I had begun to write down dates and events. I pointed to a few lines. Days when I saw fear in Noah's face, days when I was turned away, days when he had gone to the clinic or to the school counselor. Then I mentioned the photo of Noah's notebook page. I did not show the picture itself to everyone at once. Instead, I passed my phone to Miss Reed and let her see it first. She studied the dates and short words on it, then compared them with my timeline. I saw her eyes move back and forth between the two pages. She nodded once and asked if everyone could see a printed copy later. I said yes. Next, Mr. Lawson quietly opened his thin file. He spoke in a soft voice, but every word was precise. He said that Noah had visited his office many times over the past year. He read short parts of his notes, dates when Noah arrived upset, general descriptions of feeling cornered at home, and his own concern that the boy always blamed himself for everything. He pointed out dates that matched both my timeline and the notebook photo. Ms. Reed then opened her own folder. She took out a set of papers from the clinic. She summarized the visits. One for a fall on the stairs, one for a twisted arm, one for a bruise that had not been explained clearly. Each time, she said, the explanation given was that Noah was clumsy or did not listen. She did not accuse anyone directly. She just read the lines as they were written by doctors. She also mentioned a short written statement from Ms. Ortiz, the neighbor. In it, the neighbor said she often heard raised voices, long lectures, doors closing hard, and the sound of a young person crying. She said she had once asked in a quiet way if everything was all right and had been told that strict rules were needed in that house. As this picture formed on the table, I watched Travis out of the corner of my eye. His posture shifted. At first, he leaned back, but slowly his shoulders came forward. His fingers tapped on the table, then stopped. His mouth tightened when Mr. Lawson mentioned the notebook. When Ms. Reed brought up the clinic records, he opened his hands in a small gesture, as if to say the professionals were overreacting, but he did not interrupt. Then Ms. Reed asked me if there was anything else I wanted to add. I took out the copy of the house title that Ms. Patel had given me. I explained that years ago I had paid most of the down payment for the house so that my daughter and my grandson could have a safe place to live. I said I had asked that my name stay on the title for that reason, not to control their lives, but to protect them if anything ever went wrong. I pointed to the line that described the purpose of the purchase, to provide stable housing for Melissa and her child. I said that, in my mind, that purpose was no longer being honored if the child in that house was living in fear. I also took out the simple summary from the bank about Noah's education fund. I said I had built this fund over many years so that Noah would have a chance for school or training later. I said no one else had a right to this money and that, until I knew he was safe and supported, I would not allow it to be treated as part of general family funds. At this point, Ms. Patel joined the meeting by speakerphone. Her voice came through a small device in the center of the table. She introduced herself as my legal advisor and confirmed what I had just said, that my name on the house title gave me standing in any discussion about safety there, and that the education fund was under my control alone. She explained in simple terms that if child services and the station judged the environment unsafe, I could move to protect both the boy and the property. Travis tried to speak then. He said that this was all an attack on his role as head of the house. He said that children needed firm hands and that modern rules made parents afraid to do what was needed. He accused me, in general terms, of turning Noah against him and of trying to take over their lives through money and papers. I did not answer him directly. Instead, I looked at Ms. Reed and said that I had no desire to run their house. I only wanted my grandson to live without fear and without being blamed for everything that went wrong. I said that if the only way to do that was to change where he slept at night, then I was ready to do my part. The room fell quiet. Papers lay open on the table like a map. The dates, notes, and simple phrases formed a line that anyone could follow. Finally, Ms. Reed spoke. She said that, based on the pattern shown by the school, the clinic, the neighbor, and my own records, her office could not ignore the risk any longer. She proposed a temporary change, that Noah would stay with me for a period while a full review took place. She said that visits with his mother would be arranged in a neutral place, and that any direct control by Travis would be paused during this time. Officer Green nodded slowly. He said that he supported this step, that his own experience with the family files pointed in the same direction. He then took a form from his folder, wrote a few lines on it, and placed it on the table. Ms. Reed added a note about the house, that any future decision about who lived there would have to consider the original purpose of the purchase and the safety of the child. She also noted, for the record, that I had chosen to suspend any financial support that allowed someone to use that house in a way that went against that purpose. Melissa's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with her hand. For a second, she looked at me, really looked, as if seeing not just her father, but the man who had helped build the floor under her feet. Then her eyes moved to Noah, who had been waiting outside until now. The door opened, and Noah stepped in, guided by a staff member. He looked smaller than his age in that moment, but when he saw me at the table, something in his posture changed. He walked to the empty chair beside me and sat down without being told. I did not touch him. I just placed my hand on the table, close to his, so he could see it. Ms. Reed explained the temporary decision to him in simple words, that he would stay with me for a while, that no one could lay hands on him in anger, that he would still see his mother, but in safe places. She did not use big terms. She spoke as if to a person who had already heard too many long speeches. Travis tried to stand, but Officer Green raised a hand and reminded him that the decision was official and that any attempt to go against it would have consequences. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. Then Officer Green picked up his pen and signed the form in front of everyone. The sound of the pen moving across the paper was the only noise in the room. When he was done, he tore off the top copy and handed it to Ms. Reed. I closed my folder. I did not feel joy. I felt something heavier and cleaner, like air after a storm. I rose slowly from my chair. Noah stood up beside me. As we turned to leave the room, I heard Travis's chair scrape back from the table, but he said nothing. Melissa's eyes were wet, her hands clasped together in front of her. Our gazes met for one brief second. There were no words. I placed my hand gently on Noah's shoulder, and together we walked out into the hallway, leaving the signed form on the table behind us.